Welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, Chief Operating Officer of WBC. And today we are joined by three of our champion partners and board members. Barbie Bigelow, the CEO of Emerald Growth Partners and WBC Honorary Advisory Council champion. Velma Delaveau, Managing Partner of Vo Solutions, former principal of Booz Allen. And Anna Dutra, CEO of Mandela Global and WBC Board Director. Welcome, Barbie, Velma, and Anna.
Hi, Gwen.
Hello, everybody. As you all know, WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 75 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors and advisory and leader councils, include more than 34% people of color. Please check the chat for our 9 action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. So today we want to talk about our Women's Cyber Governance Collaborative, WCGC. This is a new initiative to advance women in the critical area of cybersecurity, digital readiness, and cyber risk governance. Our first cohort of 100 women, corporate tech executives and board members with cybersecurity expertise will address the knowledge gap in the boardroom and improve the pipeline of board-ready cyber expertise. So let's get started. Barbie, I want to start with you. Let's start with the objective of the WCGC. You chair the steering committee, and tell us, what's the objective of this collaborative?
Yeah, so excited to be talking about this, Gwen. As you mentioned, the studies have really showing that this corporate governance gap, and it stems from a knowledge asymmetry, where the board does not receive the key information that it needs to assess risk. And nowhere is this really more prevalent than the underlying technology and cyber risk facing companies today. So together, WBC and our partner, the Digital Directors Network, have formed the WCGC with funding from the Gula Foundation. And what we're really about is closing that governance gap and creating better corporate governance, which really means that we've got to look at both sides of that gap. We have to look at the current directors and the skill set and knowledge, asking the right questions from a governance standpoint, and the technology executives that bring that information to the board, and being able to bring those two constituencies together into a common language. So as you said, what we're really focused on initially here with the WCGC is this initial cohort of 100, which has 75 current directors and 25 technology executives going through the program, really understanding what that language and a framework for risk assessment could be, so that they have a common language, and really bringing that to the forefront. Now, we also know that women are underrepresented in the technology and board ranks, and many are working to change that. But that's another big part of why we formed the WCGC. Once directors are in the seat, there's still that unconscious bias and the question of credibility. I mean, let's just be honest, right? WCGC really provides a platform to reinforce that credibility, thought leadership, and the expertise of women cyber governance leaders. Right now, that gap in cyber savvy and technology may actually be widening. Using cyber governance training as an example, the percentage of enrollees in those programs is increasingly male even increasingly more maybe than the current, percentages that we see. So again, that's why this initiative is so important to me personally, and I think important to us as we really look to address this gap. Vilma and Anna, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add there.
I think this was a great introduction, Barbie. And first of all, it is an honor to be here with all of you. I love those discussions. The only thing I would add is the fact that if cyber was important before the pandemic, because we had so many data breaches, and that affects companies' reputation, trust in the brand, and trust in the leadership, and it became a risk management, but also a serious governance issue. After the pandemic, it became so much more so. And after the pandemic and all the geopolitical things we're seeing, number one, because access is much more spread with people working from home and working from anywhere. You never know how they're accessing data, information, and sometimes truly sensitive information. The other thing is that the number of bad actors and the number of ways to penetrate systems multiplies on a day-to-day basis. So it is a business issue to have more people in general with that type of expertise in the boardroom. But it's also a great lever for women, because if we know that there's a white space that is not dominated by gender yet, and we can equip ourselves and equip others to come into interviews as a viable candidate to a board director seat, who also has an expertise that we already know boards need, then it's a win-win situation to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that. I think it's such a privilege to be working on this issue. It's very important. I think in addition to what both Barbie and Anna have said, we've got so many studies now, including a Gardner research study that says 88% of boards consider cyber to be a business risk, not just an IT problem. And so there's a greater understanding and appreciation for the talent. I would say we have been very impressed with the types of women executives that we have been seeing applying. We have been very excited about what the pool looks like. And the more the word gets out, I think we're going to see even more women applying. The one thing that we would love to see that will help advance this issue is that women not only add value at the board level, but also to make sure that they're champions in their own industries, that they're willing to be champions, to really make sure that they're a voice for this issue and an example of what we can do. And the other thing I think we're looking for, just especially with the technology executives, that they come into this not just with the functional expertise of cyber, but they also bring a holistic business perspective, that we're not just looking at cyber in and of itself, but we're looking at how does it really impact operations and people that understand P&L, and how is it really driving value for the company, and how does it create risk? And most importantly, how is it really driving the company value and the mission? And so I think we're asking people as we enter into this, that we want folks to have a holistic perspective on cyber.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Velma. And you and I were talking about that the other day in terms of the not to stereotype, but just the inclination that women have to really focus on the impact and why, and that this is really can be a strength or almost a secret weapon for us in the boardroom and as technology executives, where we understand the mission and the purpose of the organization and are focused on growing, growth from a value standpoint, the value creation of technology. And so it's a risk and an opportunity balance here. And we're just in a really good spot, I think, as technology executives, to help educate the board on that, educate our management team on that, and then bring that to the forefront and advocate and be prominent voices as Anna just was, right, about the emerging risk and threats and the nation state issues and the ransomware issues and just bringing all of that to the forefront.
So I have a couple of questions on. So we're talking about kind of like the profiles on the one vein of like who we're looking for, right? So we've got an application open for 25 corporate tech executives and 75 sitting board directors. And we're trying to find women that have, as Velma, Barbie, and Anna described, some of this expertise and really help build that. So there's the kind of what the profile we're looking for. But also, when Velma, when you mentioned P&L, and you reminded me of pathways, right? And Barbie, you mentioned the gap. So what does this pathway look like as this issue rises up, into business importance, right? And into a priority for business or a strategic issue. But yet we know in sort of tech roles, women, are less than 25% of corporate tech roles and only about 27% of CISO positions in the Fortune 500. So, why is it important to kind of look at that pathway, look at the different pathway? And let's talk a little bit about diversity, because we know those numbers look very different for women of color, because 83% of these positions are held by white women, quite frankly. So what are those pathways are doing, and how can we kind of help build those pathways and have this conversation?
So I think this is super tricky, as we look at the SEC guidelines that are coming out, that are now under review and that are going to come out in the spring, because the traditional perspective here is that a qualified technical expert is analogous to a qualified financial expert, if you remember back to the Sarbanes-Oxley days. And those requirements are pretty black and white. They're pretty stringent in terms of, having a CPA, having been in a CFO, CEO role, having had that financial responsibility. And so, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what boards do with that, because clearly there aren't enough people of any gender and race that to fill a role, with that specific profile. And the question becomes, so what's valuable on the board? What's valuable in terms of the number of boxes you can check when you look at a competency matrix for a board member, being kind of the just one-dimensional, if you will, in cyber is probably not going to be something that boards are going to be willing, or companies are going to be willing to have a seat just for that. So, as we think about that then, and we think about the value on the board, it's, what is that? What are those other skill sets? And as Anna said, how do you layer this in to be valuable to the board with both an understanding of cyber, an understanding of how systemic risk works, and how that fits with the overall strategy and remit of the company. So, I think what Velma's saying here is super important when you think about it. Have you had those other experiences that really round you out and make you good, a good fit? And the same is true for technology executives. I mean, we've been having this conversation for years now, around how CIOs, in particular, technology executives, CTOs, really have to have business acumen. So these are the things that I think as we look at a pathway, it's really people looking at their career, maybe not in a traditional vertical, but having come from different areas and bringing different perspectives. And this is where, I think I get excited about diversity. It's not just about gender, and it's not just about race. It's about diversity of thought.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, let me add something, because Barbie, I do get the compliance part of a qualified financial expert, qualified cybersecurity expert, and all that. But I'm putting my hat on as chair of two non-gov committees, one in a public company, one in a private company. I think that boards can be creative when they want to bring the right candidate, or to create the right conditions with already existing board members. The truth is that there are limited board seats to fill, right? So I don't think that anybody will use a board seat with somebody who is one-dimensional in terms of cyber, right? You have to bring more than that. You have to bring cyber and some operating experience or very holistic business acumen. On the other hand, if we want to bring somebody who doesn't have the cyber background, but we need to check the qualified, the CTE, the QTE box, take one of the directors and qualify them by take somebody, which was what I did. I have a technology background. I did the whole certification program, the Carnegie Mellon and ACD and all that, and boom, then that helps the board, because now you have somebody who took time and put effort and had the right background to understand it. The other thing, and this was something that Velma asked me to address, one of the things that I started to do as I chair non-gov committees and we're bringing new directors in, is actually ask the recruiter, I want to see 2 lists. I want to see one list that is the more traditional industry background, P&L responsibility and all that. So all those things that, gee, that's a shoe-in, right? But I also want to see what we call the innovation list. And these are people who don't necessarily fall into a traditional profile, but they could be really interesting value-added directors to the board. And you know what we're doing now, it's interesting because we're right in the middle of this process. So we picked for the short list candidates from list A and list B, and let's talk to them and let's see who at the end of the day, because there will always be trade-offs, who is going to be the most value-added candidate on the board. So I think, yes, there's the compliance issue, but we can't make that an excuse to just X people who don't fair and square have that narrow and deep expertise.
Yeah, I think the fit is still super important, right?
Yeah.
Anna? Yeah.
But one more point, I do think women need to be deliberate about this non-traditional path we're talking about. It means really, I mean, I started on my career as an engineer and I learned quickly that as I entered into different arenas, R&D, manufacturing, and then finally cyber, that what made me successful was bringing a business perspective. And so I think that that is still true today, and it's becoming more and more important. And so I just want to say that we've got to be deliberate about that, having those experiences. And companies used to have programs that did that, where they would rotate you in different sectors of the business so that as you became, I think as you rose in your career as an executive, you really had a perspective on how one particular issue would impact and permeate through the entire business enterprise. And so I think that's still important, not only at the executive level, but at the board level.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Velma. And I also can say, you know, kind of looking back on my career, not having done that deliberately, but having, you know, been pulled into roles and having had those opportunities, that even sometimes when they weren't promotions, when they were lateral, but they gave me that perspective, you know, a different perspective outside of engineering, on the, you know, contracting and compliance side, for example, you know, how really valuable that is looking back on it, having had those opportunities.
So as we close this out, because we're running up against our short lunchtime, 20 minutes, I want to ask each of you, we've talked a lot about kind of, this is a business issue, this is on the agenda, this is on the boards, talked a bit about, you know, what the women can do, and Velma started to talk, what's the one thing, you know, 1 or 2 things a company or organization can do to make sure that they're ensuring that there is a diversity of perspective and thought in these roles, whether that's at the tech executives, that C-suite level, or whether that's at the board level. Velma, you want to start?
I think that it is still true today, not in all sectors, but that there is a pervasive sort of attitude that we're going to recruit members from our social circle and business circles that we know. And we're not as deliberate about going to organizations that are equipping and preparing women that are ready. NACD, which I'm a member of, that's National Association of Corporate Directors, and so many other organizations are working so hard and are producing women that are ready. And I think the organizations have to be, they have to really open the aperture and be deliberate about it. And that starts at the top.
I totally agree with you, Velma. I think it's, I'm in the no excuses zone, right? You have organizations like WBC, NACD, Women Corporate Directors, Latino Corporate Directors Association, ELC. How many more do you need to have access to databases that have an incredible group of qualified women to pick from? So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and
done
look,
with
we're
this.
proving that right now, right? We're absolutely proving that right now. I mean, the folks who are already coming in and have already signed up for, you know, the DDN 501 and 502 classes are amazing, amazing, accomplished, you know, world class. There's no argument that they're the best in their field, right?
Oh, no
And
question.
so, you know, I think what Velma said, if I had one thing to leave everyone with, it's that just, it's pretty simple. Make sure your slate's diverse. If you've got diversity on your slate, people are gonna, you're gonna have what you need.
But also, let me just close with one thing, 30 seconds. For the women who, if you know you're qualified, get yourself in those databases, get yourself in those lists, because you can only be found if you are in the NACD, WCD, ELC, all those organizations we talked about. So reach out. It's your part of the job. It's otherwise, if you make yourself difficult to find, then you can't blame anybody else, right? So make yourself easy to find by not only getting in those databases, but also self-identified as a woman of color, LGBTQ, Indigenous. I mean, take your pick, but put it there.
Put it there, and that's a perfect sort of way to close that, because we can put a pitch in for, you know, apply for this training, you know, that we are offering through WBC. And these ladies have talked about the amazing candidates and the relevance. And I want to thank you, Barbie, Velma, and Anna, for all of your insights today. Please visit the WCGC page and submit your application if you're a C-suite executive or sitting board member focused on cyber. And we are confirming trainings and taking applications as we speak. And that's all we have time for today. We invite you to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about WBC's initiatives to increase women in the C-suite and the boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women in industries such as technology and access to capital, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders that are going to bring gender and pay parity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. And next week, my co-host Linda Peak-Shack will be in conversation with Harvard Advanced Leadership Fellow Renata Soto, founder of Mosaic Changemakers and a network of leaders of color across the Southeast. And join us weekly to keep up to date on our next guest, on our progress and the movement for gender parity in business. Follow us on social media at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and have a wonderful Thursday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Hey, everybody.